Canadians who farm and fish are now caught in a tariff squeeze by Canada's two biggest markets, the U.S. and China. Retaliatory Chinese tariffs are now in effect against billions of dollars in key Canadian exports. The biggest hit will be on canola, a key cash crop on the prairies. China is slapping a 100% tariff on canola oil and related products. It's taking effect with canola prices already low. China is also targeting Canadian seafood, 25% tariffs there that cover 40 products fished on Canadian coasts, including crab and lobster. There's also a 25% tariff on Canadian pork sold to China. The Chinese tariffs are all in retaliation for Canada's 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles. They add to the economic disruption and uncertainty for this country just weeks before more U.S. tariffs are set to hit. So we have complete coverage of the story for you this morning. And let's dig into some of the details for both industries, beginning in Atlantic Canada. Seafood producers there are expecting to be hit hard. Brett Ruskin is leading off our coverage. He's live in Sambro, Nova Scotia, which is just south of Halifax. We see the backdrop to your reporting today, Brett. Lobster is big business where you are. What do these new Chinese tariffs mean for the industry?
Heather, uncertainty in the seafood industry indeed, at least heading into this springtime season. You can see the lobster traps behind me. You can see the lobster boats behind me off in the distance there at the wharf. There is question as to what the lobster pricing will be set at with these Chinese tariffs now in place. So what could be done? There could be an additional 25% charge for Canadian lobster when it arrives in the Chinese market for those Chinese buyers. But that will make Canadian lobster a little bit less competitive compared to lobster from other countries. So what's the other option? Well, producers here could take a 25% hit and have 25% less profit. That's bad for business here at home. So no really good solution. But the main status right now of the lobster industry is this tense negotiation trying to figure out how lobster prices will be set for the springtime season. Here is Jeff Irvin with the Lobster Council of Canada talking about the current situation.
Well, it means a great amount of uncertainty. We're coming into our very busy spring production period where every fishing district almost in Canada is open. It's a struggle at the best of times to set prices in the spring, to liaise with our customers, to make sure that the entire value chain works together. But having this type of uncertainty around the costs and sort of how our customers will accept these tariffs makes it all that much more difficult.
So the situation right now isn't entirely dire or desperate. It is, though, difficult because they are trying to set these prices. However, there is still strong demand for lobster, both in the Chinese market as well as the American market. So the matter right now is dealing with setting these prices to figure out how much lobster could be sold for abroad in these export markets. Heather.
Brett, I was mentioning coming on the air that there are about 40 products all told that Canadians fish coast to coast to coast. So tell us about the impact of these tariffs on some of the other types of seafood.
Yeah, looking at shrimp, looking at salmon, haddock, halibut, sea cucumber. Sea cucumber is a big industry in terms of the export market. So sea cucumbers that are produced here, those kind of slimy, squishy sea creatures that are dried and then exported and either placed into capsules or cut up into small pieces as a luxury food item, as a premium food item or additive and ingredient to cook with. They are being exported to Chinese markets, to American markets as well. And those are the two main export markets. And so some of the businesses here on the East Coast rely heavily on that export market. Here is the head of Atlantic Sea Cucumbers talking about what this means for the business with the existing tariffs that are already on sea cucumbers, plus these new tariffs applied today.
Now, after 20% extra, it will be like 30%. Then it will be a big difference. It will totally destroy the business. I don't know how to deal with it.
And so, again, not knowing how to deal with it, he's asking for government support in some way. As for the Nova Scotia government, there's a $200 million fund to help Nova Scotians in general dealing with the tariffs, and another $200,000 for the seafood industry specifically to help diversify for other markets if those American markets, if the Chinese market becomes economically unsustainable. Heather.
Brett, thank you very much. Leading things off with the impact on seafood and that report out of Sambro, Nova Scotia. But again, the 100% tariff that China is placing now in effect on Canadian canola products. Let's bring in Linda Ward, who's bringing us that part of the story.
Yeah, 100% tariffs on Canadian canola oil and peas specifically, 25% as you've been hearing on the seafood, but also on Canadian pork. And this is, of course, in response to Canada slapping 100% tariffs on Chinese-made electric vehicles, 25% on steel and aluminum last fall. We export quite a lot of canola and pork, and when we break down the numbers, you can see China is Canada's second largest market, $5 billion worth of canola products to China last year. $1 billion of that, though, is canola meal and oil. Canola seed was spared from this round of tariffs, which so far could spare the most devastating effects. But industry leaders say this could still be very devastating to the bottom line of so many people in the industry. Canola farmers have seen the value of their crop drop since these tariffs were announced. And this is, of course, only weeks before planting begins. So many are worrying that they will be selling at a loss at some point. And when we look at the number for the amount of pork that we do export, Farm Credit Canada says Canada averaged 262,000 tons of pork exports to China. Now look at this as well, 270,000 tons of pork exports to the United States as well. And of course, April 2nd is fast approaching. Donald Trump's tariffs set to kick in. Canadian canola and pork farmers then facing trade uncertainty from their two largest export markets. And we're hearing from the chair of the Canadian Canola Growers Association, who says that this is squeezing the industry.
You know, right now we have tariffs coming on with China. We're looking at tariffs with the United States. Right now it feels like I'm sitting on a park bench between two elephants. Like it's really hard to breathe at that point. And right now it's really the uncertainty of it. And but the thing is, we can't survive with that. Like it doesn't make sense.
So he's calling on the Canadian government to drop the EV tax. And many industry groups and prairie premiers, we've heard them calling on the federal government to cover the losses that they would incur from these tariffs and give financial compensation in line with those losses that have been incurred.
Exactly. Offer those supports, engage with China to work a way out of this. What is the government doing, Linda?
Yeah, so the federal government has said that China's tariffs are unjustified, but it hasn't announced really any compensation package yet. And we've reached out about whether it would consider taking that EV tariff off, but not heard anything back about that just yet. We're hearing from Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe, who says he's told the federal minister that they need to reach out to the Chinese government, find a path forward here on behalf of not only canola producers, but also seafood and pork producers as well, because this tariff, alongside the U.S. trade uncertainty, will decimate these industries within a matter of weeks, not months.
That's why I've asked the new Prime Minister to reach out to President Xi in China before he calls an election, because by the time even an election writ period is over federally, we will be facing substantial job loss, not only in Saskatchewan, but across Western Canada. So really, a Western Canadian expense at the benefit of a non-existent EV auto industry in Eastern Canada.
And as for what the provinces are doing on their part, Saskatchewan did not set aside any money to help manage the potential impact of tariffs. Alberta set aside $4 billion this year for that, up $2 billion from the year before. And Manitoba, we know, will be delivering its provincial budget today. So watching for any measures that are announced there to help with the potential impact of these tariffs.
Okay, Linda, thank you very much. And again, complete coverage of this story. We'll talk about canola with the head of the the Canola Council of Canada in our 9 o'clock Eastern hour as well. Now let's bring you the Chinese perspective. In Hong Kong, reporter Laura Westbrook is with me. China is framing these tariffs as retaliatory, Laura, for those Canadian tariffs on EVs. What are we hearing today, in fact, from the Chinese government?
Yeah, that's right. China is saying that this is in retaliation for Canadian tariffs that were introduced last October. 100% tariffs on Chinese-made electric vehicles, following in the footsteps of the United States and the European Union, who also imposed levies on Chinese-made EVs, as well as 25% tariffs on steel and aluminium. Now then, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said that this was to protect Canadian workers, and that Chinese state subsidies making Chinese EVs cheaper and flooding markets was unfair competition. But China has said that those claims are groundless, and it said that Canada is implementing protectionism. It's also filed a complaint with the World Trade Organization, and it's accused Canada of imposing these tariffs unilaterally. It's also implemented a anti-dumping investigation into canola, and that's important because more than half of Canada's canola exports go to China.
Canada's diplomatic relationship is still a contentious one. It goes back to the era of the two Michaels, really very fractious since that time. But what signal is Ottawa sending to Ottawa with these tariffs, Laura?
Well, I was speaking to economist Gary Ng, and he told me that this is Beijing sending a signal to Canada, saying that if it's going to be aligning itself with the United States and its trade policies, and that it was also sending a signal to Canada about that it should push back on pressure from the United States to follow tariffs on Chinese goods. Now, we know that the US implemented these tariffs on Chinese-made EVs, with Canada following. And then late last month, US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent encouraged Canada to also implement fresh tariffs on Chinese goods. Now, China is the second largest trading partner after the United States. And analysts say that these tariffs are also China being quite targeted in its targeting industries that it knows will be costly to Canada. For example, lobsters. As you mentioned, relations have soured since 2018 when there was the arrest of Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou, and then that followed with China arresting two Canadian nationals. All three were subsequently released in 2021. And we did see relations beginning to thaw with that surprise visit by Foreign Minister Melanie Joly last July. But with these latest tariffs, it doesn't look like there will be a thaw in relations between these two countries.